Hello students, today I will discuss tuberculosis. Now you know that tuberculosis is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and this disease is unlike COVID-19, which is only around for last 7 months. This disease is with us for about 70,000 years, and it is still a very dangerous enemy for mankind. It kills about 2 million people every year till now. Around 1.5 million people were died from tuberculosis alone in 2018. And in India especially, the tuberculosis is a very important disease due to poor socioeconomic condition, and the disease is very much prevalent here. About one third of global cases is contributed by India. And for your exam purpose also, tuberculosis is very important wherever you go, in pharmacology, pathology, community medicine, microbiology, wherever you go, tuberculosis is a very important topic. And you are going to face a lot of patients here in India of tuberculosis. So it is very important to learn about pathophysiology of tuberculosis, the microbiological property of tuberculosis and other mycobacteria, and of course the treatment you must know. And you also have to know different programs conducted by our government regarding the control of tuberculosis. So the program which runs here is RNTCP. I think you have heard about this. So revised National Tuberculosis Control Program, that is run by our government. And in today's lecture, our main topic is of course pharmacology, pharmacotherapy of tuberculosis, and how we are going to treat tuberculosis patient. But before that, I want to discuss in brief about different aspects of this bacteria and how it affects us. So let's start. So this is the picture. It is slightly old. In 2013, I got it from Harrison's, and you can see here how India is very much in green, and as much green is present, so it is around this zone. So it is highly prevalent. Tuberculosis is highly prevalent here in India. And in this slide, you can see it is from 2016 data. So you can see that total number of cases in India is about one third of global, and the mortality due to tuberculosis is also the similar. Incidence is almost one third in all the aspects. So tuberculosis is a very important thing, and we have to learn it thoroughly. Now this is a bacteria, and if you see the structure of the bacteria, especially the cellular wall, the cell wall and plasma membrane of tuberculosis bacteria, there is a speciality about that. The speciality is this layer, the mycolic acid layer, this layer. So you can see that how much depth this layer has, the mycolic acid, and that is a very important for the pathogenesis of tuberculosis, this mycolic acid layer. And it has also Manan cap here, the greenish cap you can see here. Let me take it. Yes. So this is Manan cap, and the total this layer is mycolic acid layer, thick mycolic acid layer. And why this is very important? It protects the bacteria from multiple antibacterials as well as from the attack of our immune system. And this component, lipomannan, this is also very important, because you will see in the next few slides I will discuss that how lipomannan inhibit the macrophage to act against tuberculous bacilli. So these constituents of this shell wall is very much important for the pathogenesis. One thing I should tell you, that this is just a representation. Okay, the tuberculosis bacilli does not have any flagella, so this is just a representation. And to see that what part of tuberculosis bacteria is important. Okay, so let's move on. Now, can anybody predict what is this? I think it is very difficult, because after the storm today, the Amphan, many places of West Bengal is like this. So you cannot identify from this picture, but can you identify from this picture? The this thing was covered by this. Can you identify what is this? Yes, many of you I think have identified properly. This is Chernobyl, and here there was a nuclear explosion. There was accident in the nuclear reactor and in the Chernobyl here, and it radiates a lot of radiation, as you can expect from a nuclear reactor. And recent series is already been launched by HBO called Chernobyl, so you can see that it is very interesting. So why I am telling you now this? So this is one situation where there was irradiation. There is so much radiation was there to protect the civilization outside in the neighbor zone areas. The government built this huge dome, so it cannot eliminate the radiation. So what we can do, we can put something above that, so that radiation cannot go outside and cannot kill or cannot adversely affect the humanity. So this is one idea of containing something. So you cannot eliminate the radiation. What you can do, you can build a massive lead structure over that, so that radiation cannot go through that wall. So that was the idea. Now why I am telling you this now, because the body's immune system does almost similar kind of thing with tuberculosis bacteria also. So let's see. So whenever a mycobacteria enters into the body, you know that mycobacteria is spread via droplet. So if a person who is suffering from tuberculosis, active smear positive tuberculosis to be specific, with his cough there is droplet, the nuclei is formed, and this this such small droplet can be suspended in the air for a long period, and each nuclei contain maybe 10 to 100 this kind of mycobacteria. And whenever a person inhales this droplet, it directly goes into his lungs, and in lung it affects this macrophage. You can see here the macrophage, it affects the macrophage. Now the macrophage cannot handle this alone, because this macrophage is only an alveolar macrophage and it is non-activated. So the tubercle bacilli has very good time inside this macrophage. What it does, first it evades or bypasses the phagolysosome formation. So it is incorporated in the macrophage as a phagosome, but the phagolysosome formation, that is phagosome with lysosome incorporation, does not happen. So ultimately the bacteria does not get killed and it proliferates inside the macrophage, and ultimately this macrophage transports this into nearby lymph node, the hilar lymph nodes. In the lungs there are hilar lymph nodes. There they gets activated. The macrophage shows this antigen to T cells, especially CD4 T cells, and the CD4 T cells, here you can see the CD4 T cells. The CD4 T cells, it is present inside the lymph nodes, and then it gets activated. This T cells gets activated and it liberates this very important factor, interferon gamma, which activates macrophage. And these macrophage are not this macrophage, that means alveolar macrophage, these are not activated, but these macrophage are activated macrophage. So what they do, they go inside the site and cause severe oxidative damage to the area. So it has some bactericidal activity, and you can see it forms, suppose here are the bacteria, it forms a circle outside those bacteria and it contains inside the zone, and it kills the bacteria via high amount of oxidative stress. So this is the way they kills. So if I do not know you did get it properly or not, let me explain in slightly better way. Suppose this is our lung, and here is our trachea. So one part is supplying middle zone, one part is supplying lower zone, and another part is supplying upper zone. Now suppose some acid fast bacilli is coming via this track. So one droplet contains about 10 to 100 tubercular bacilli, AB acid fast bacilli. Now 90% of these bacilli is usually expelled via mucociliary movement of the trachea. Only 10% will reach to here. Okay. Now suppose here is a macrophage. This is a macrophage and it is an alveolar macrophage. Now it is incorporated by it incorporates the acid fast bacilli. So you can see here it is acid fast bacilli inside this by phagosome. Now this phagosome cannot be incorporated, cannot be attached with lysosome. Why? Because there is a special molecule present in the tubercular bacilli called lipoarabinomannan. I think you remember from the last slide, lipoarabinomannan inhibits the calcium calmodulin pathway, which ultimately inhibits the fusion of lysosome and with phagosome. So the tubercular bacilli cannot be killed by this macrophage. So what it does, the bacteria keep multiplying inside this macrophage, and more macrophages are being infected from this single macrophage. So there is local spread of acid fast bacilli here in this zone. But this macrophage can do one thing. What it can do, there are lymphatics. Via lymphatics, it carries some amount of acid fast bacilli antigen to a lymph node. Suppose this is a lymph node, and inside this lymph node there are these are T cells, CD4 T cells to be specific. So this macrophage, the macrophage, they carry, this is a macrophage, they carry this antigen and it shows this antigen to the CD4 T cell. This CD4 T cell via TCR, T cell receptor, via T cell receptor, it recognizes it and it gets activated. Now as soon as it gets activated, what it does, it activates macrophages. These are activated macrophages. These are not like this. This is not like this macrophage. These are activated macrophage. So what they can do, they will go here, and they will surround this area, and along with that there will be CD4 T cells. Now how these CD4 T cells activate macrophages? These macrophages by interferons, IFN, gamma. So these CD4 T cells, these are CD4 T cells, they activate these macrophages. They activate these macrophages by interferon gamma, and these macrophages now gets activated and they destroys them by oxidative stress. They surrounds them, they destroys them, the mycobacteria, and form a caseous. Let me take another color. So the caseous materials, it becomes caseous. If you see this area, now inside there is some caseous materials surrounded by some macrophages, and it is again surrounded by some CD4 T cells. So ultimately, when this is the first time one infection happened by tubercle bacilli, there are three things you can see. Number one, an area of caseation necrosis. Number two, there is inflammation of lymphatic tract. And number three, infection or inflammation of hilar lymph nodes. So 1, 2 and 3. This is called Ghon's focus. This is lymphangitis because it is an inflammation of lymphatic tract, and this is lymphadenitis. And together, taken these three things, it is called Ghon's complex. Okay, so this is all about pathology, and this happens when first time any individual who is immunocompetent, remember, who is immunocompetent individual is infected by tubercular bacilli. What happens if the person is immunocompromised? Then this type of action will not occur. In place of this, there will be some delayed type of hypersensitivity. So delayed type of hypersensitivity will occur, which will cause local destruction of lung tissue. Okay, local destruction of lung tissue. But it cannot kill the mycobacteria well. So the mycobacteria can surround the area. It can go from one lobe to other lobe, or it can, if it can break into any vessel, it can go systemic, causing extrapulmonary manifestations. So this is the pathophysiology of tubercular infection. So again you can see here, first time one alveolar macrophage enters, first time mycobacteria enters the alveolar macrophage. This alveolar macrophage cannot kill the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It brings it and shows it to a T cell. Where is that? It is present inside the lymph node. So inside the lymph node, the T cell is activated and it becomes this Th1. Actually, there is also activation of Th2. One is Th1, another is Th2. Th2 type of activation. It is more related to humoral immunity. But the main function here is of Th1, which activates the macrophages and creates a special type of macrophage by interferon gamma. This macrophage ultimately causes the bactericidal activity. Okay, and it also recruits monocyte. it also recruits monocytes in the area. So more and more monocytes comes, and also there are neutrophils, sometimes neutrophils comes, and of course there are CD4 T cells. And finally it ultimately it contains the infection, that the Mycobacterium tuberculosis is remains inside this granuloma. This is called granuloma formation, and it remains inside this. So now you can see why I have given this picture. So you cannot kill it first time. So what you can do, you can keep it under control. Similarly, in our human body also, the immune system is trying to do the same. It is trying to kill the bacteria, but first uh, it keeps things under control. And here is the area, you can see. This is the caseation part. Sorry. Okay, first let me remove the. Yes. So you can see in the center, this is the caseation necrosis, and outside that there are cells. The cells, which is what cells? Macrophages, activated macrophage, and little bit of neutrophil. This is the current theory, that neutrophil is also present there, but mainly macrophage, monocyte, and lymphocytes. These are the main things that is present inside this granuloma. Okay, now I think this is clear how the infection happens. Now, what is the fate of the infection? What is the fate? Now you can see, this is the first time suppose this infection happens. So this is the primary infection, and primary complex is formed. That means I already told you, Horn's focus, lymphadenitis, and lymphangitis. So you can see the inflamed lymph node and the caseation. Now it can have three fates. Number one, immunocompetent host. The bacteria are killed by the immune system totally, and the lesions become only a scar by fibrosis. So that is one fate. Next fate, number two, what can happen? It can remain inside the granuloma formation. So there are viable bacilli remains inside the granuloma, but it is not killed. Okay, it cannot proliferate because there is very low amount of oxygen in there, and there is high amount of, the pH is also low. So taken together, the bacteria cannot grow there, but it remains dormant, and it waits for the opportunity. So when the host is immunocompetent, it returns back. So reactivation. Okay, so that is second fate. And third fate, what can happen? That the primary complex, on the initial infection, it goes, especially it happens in the immunocompromised patient or children whose immune system is not very much active. The primary infection cannot be kept under control by the macrophages. So there is delayed type of hypersensitivity, severe delayed type of hypersensitivity occurs locally, and there is local tissue damage. So there is progression of, so you can see here and here, progression of disease locally, and finally it can go systemic and becomes miliary TB. Miliary TB means the tuberculosis bacilli is forming granuloma throughout the body. It is spreaded throughout the body, and it is a very grave condition, and the prognosis is very poor. So this is one fate can happen. Or this miliary TB can happen also in case of secondary TB. Secondary TB means maybe it is due to reactivation or reinfection. Reinfection can happen also. Both of them can cause secondary tuberculosis. Secondary tuberculosis again two fate. First, it can cause localized cavity formation or scarring, or it can go into the miliary tuberculosis. So this is the two fate of progressive secondary TB. Okay, so if you think as a whole, so again, a patient is first time having the infection. The primary Ghon's focus is formed, the primary complex is formed with lymphadenitis and lymphangitis. Now it has three fate. Number one, it can totally heal, that is very good for the patient. Second, it can latent, it is okay for the patient for now at least. And third, it can progress, that is a very bad sign for the patient. And this can goes to miliary tuberculosis, which is very bad for the patient. It is almost fatal. And there may be secondary activation or reinfection of a tuberculosis. In both the cases, it is called adult type of tuberculosis or post-primary tuberculosis, which can cause caseative necrosis and cavity formation, you can see here, or miliary tuberculosis. Now, cavity formation usually occurs in the apical portion of the lung. Why? Because this apical portion has highest amount of oxygen, and you know that tuberculosis bacteria requires oxygen. Now again the same thing, Ghon's complex, you can see here, this is the Ghon's focus, I have already demonstrated you, and this is the lymphatic channels, and this is the lymph nodes. So taken together we call it Ghon's complex. And let's see an X-ray of that. So yes, so this is number one, the Ghon's focus. In the two-ish, there must be some lymphangitis, but it is not very much evident here. But you can see here that there is hilar lymph node enlargement, so there is a shadow there. So this is primary disease of tuberculosis. Second, primary progressive, that means the primary tuberculosis, the same tuberculosis that has attacked the first time, and it is mainly causes pleural effusion, cavitation, lymph node enlargement. You can see this pneumonia, so this is caseating pneumonia. So this is not good thing for patient. And post-primary disease, that means reactivation or reinfection. Now most of the cases it has been seen that nowadays it is seen that it is reinfection is the major cause, and usually this kind of lesion is seen in apical region. So you can see here in the apical region there is cavity, and you can see that there is a air fluid level. So you can see here, I think, so there is air fluid level also. So the liquefied necrotic materials causing bronchogenic spread. So this is the thing that has happened. This is a chest X-ray of an adult or post-primary disease. Okay. In usual symptoms are fever, weight loss, and nocturnal fever. Usually the fever comes at night. And purulent sputum, very important, purulent sputum, and via this sputum more and more spread occurs, spread to the other people, that is the patient become infectious. And hemoptysis. Why hemoptysis happens? Because sometimes the cavity formation of tissue extraction leads to damage to arterial wall, which causes local bleeding, and this bleeding can manifest as hemoptysis. Whenever the patient coughs out, there is blood. So this is hemoptysis. Now this was all about pulmonary tuberculosis. Now remember, tuberculosis can affect almost every organ of the body. Almost every organ. But the most important ones has been listed here. You have to know about tubercular meningitis, Pott's spine, and miliary tuberculosis. Tubercular meningitis is a very fatal condition. So you have to have the clinical eye to diagnose this case very early. Patient usually presents with severe headache, lethargy, and maybe altered consciousness. You have to take the history of tuberculosis contact. Sometimes it is not there, and you if there is low grade fever and with this kind of symptom, always keep in mind you have to do a lumbar puncture. So you have to take the CSF and look for the acid fast bacilli, or nowadays we perform CBNAT. I am coming into that a little bit later. So tubercular meningitis diagnosis is very important. And another particular important thing about tubercular meningitis is that in this case we use corticosteroid along with the antitubercular management. It has been shown that the prognosis is better with corticosteroid therapy. The mortality is lesser if a patient is treated along with tuberculosis, antitubercular drugs and corticosteroids together. Port spine, this causes this is one of the important causes of vertebral pathological fracture. Okay, you have to remember that. And miliary tuberculosis, of course it is a very grave condition. The small tuberculoma is spread throughout the body and also throughout the lung. So this is miliary tuberculosis, and this is the way how we can diagnose tuberculosis. The first one is the most cheaper one, the microscopy, but the problem is you can miss. So sensitivity is around 40% only. So if you see 10 cases of tuberculosis, you will get only 4 cases of acid fast bacillus stain. Now why acid fast? Because you cannot, first you have to remember that tuberculous bacilli you cannot stain them with gram stain because of their high mycolic acid content in their cell wall. You can, but if it is stained, suppose in a stain like Jaden stain, you cannot bleach it. So acid alcohol, it is totally resistant to bleaching. That means it is now acid alcohol resistant. So that is why it is called acid fast bacilli. Now microscopy is very cheap, but it is again difficult. Sometimes you miss. Culture, it is the gold standard procedure, and we do this culture in LJ media. I think you have learned in microbiology classes LJ media, but nowadays there are very much sophisticated techniques for culture, but usually it takes, if you take the old method, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks for the tuberculous bacilli to grow. So it is very long time, and especially some emergency cases like I said in tubercular meningitis, the patient can be killed inside that time. So this is the problem with culture. So that is why this third test, CBNAT, that is cartridge based nucleic acid amplification technique. So this is the test, this is the now today's very much used test, and it is the recommended test right now. So about 90% sensitivity. So this is a very good test. And last but not the least, radiology. Radiology give you a quick idea about the case. So radiology is you can think about it is like a screening test. Okay, the radiology. And of course there is very important, the most important thing that will help you for the diagnosis of tuberculosis is your clinical eye. So the clinical suspicion is the most important thing. We have to think that the patient might be suffering from tuberculosis. Sometimes you will see the patient will not have fever, only weight loss patient can present. There are many atypical presentation of tuberculosis, especially in our country. So you have to have very high clinical suspicion about the diagnosis. And these are the tools, this microscopy, culture, CBNAT and radiology will help you with that. And remember, the CBNAT not only gives you the diagnosis of tuberculosis, but also give you the result about rifampicin sensitivity. So along with that you get an extra bonus. Okay. According to the recent guideline, the RNTCP 2016 guideline,
you will suspect a patient as presumptive pulmonary tuberculosis when he has this criteria: so cough more than 2 weeks, fever more than 2 weeks, significant weight loss, hemoptysis, and any abnormalities in chest radiography. Any one of these, if there is a case with any of this kind of symptom or sign, you have to think about tuberculosis. And presumptive pulmonary TB, that means the patient is not yet diagnosed as pulmonary tuberculosis, but you are having a suspicion that the patient might be suffering from pulmonary tuberculosis. How you diagnose him? By additional methods with the help of chest radiograph, culture, smear examination, and CBNAT. And this is the current guideline. You can see here the presumptive tuberculosis patient, if he is HIV, you have to do CBNAT directly. If he is not patient of HIV, then you do these things: smear examination and chest X-ray, and based on this you have to proceed. So I think this slide is actually little bit difficult to remember, so I have made it little bit easier for you. So the almost the same thing has been explained here, but it is visually more appealing, and I think you can remember this way. So suppose a patient of presumptive tuberculosis has come to you. Presumptive tuberculosis means again cough more than 2 weeks or fever more than 2 weeks, suggestive chest radiograph, history of weight loss, and hemoptysis. One of these must be present. So now you think of this patient presumptive tuberculosis. Now what you do? First you do a chest X-ray and AFB examination, that is microscopical examination of sputum. Suppose it comes positive with AFB. Now you can call this patient as microbiologically confirmed tuberculosis. Now what happens if it becomes negative? Now you do chest X-ray. Actually we do it together. Now depending upon the chest X-ray result, it might be negative. If it is negative, then you have to think clinically again, that is it tuberculosis or any alternative diagnosis is more likely. But if the chest X-ray is suggestive, then you do a CBNAT. So you can see this sign is showing you about CBNAT. This one is about chest X-ray. This one is microscopy, the simple sputum acid fast bacilli with Jaden stain. And now after CBNAT, if it becomes positive, it becomes microbiology confirmed tuberculosis, you can see here. But if you have clinical suspicion that yes, there might be some alternative diagnosis likely, you go for alternative diagnosis. But if the doctor thinks that although my AFB is negative, my chest X-ray is negative, still I think there might be possibility of tuberculosis, you can go for CBNAT. And if CBNAT is positive, then you have to do a microbiological, you can confirm that the patient is suffering from tuberculosis. So microbiologically confirmed TB, whom you can say, number one, if he is AFB positive or he is CBNAT positive. In two cases you can call him microbiologically confirmed tuberculosis. But what happens if even CBNAT is negative? Then you have to refer him to an expert like pulmonologist. You have to refer the patient, and you can see the sign, a stetho within sunglass, within spectacles. So basically this means that he is specialist, and if he thinks that although everything is negative and I also feel that it is negative, he will look for any alternative diagnosis. But if he feels that okay, might be sputum negative for AFB, chest X-ray is negative, and also CBNAT is negative, still I think that it is a case of tuberculosis, an expert that gives you. So I have told you that clinical suspicion is very high for this patient, so he can start anti-tubercular drugs for the patient, and this kind of patients will be called clinically diagnosed tuberculosis. That means two kind of tuberculosis, one is microbiologically confirmed, another is clinically diagnosed. Now you again look for this diagram. So once the patient has come, okay, so let's look at this again. Patient has come, if AFB is positive, no problem, microbiologically confirmed tuberculosis. If chest X-ray is negative, you think again and you also do an CBNAT. If CBNAT is positive, you can call it microbiologically confirmed TB. But if CBNAT is negative, you have to refer the patient to an expert who will give you his opinion. He may think that yes, everything is negative, I also think that it is negative for tuberculosis, then you have to look for any alternative diagnosis for fever or cough or whatever the presentation. But if he thinks everything is negative but still I think it is positive, then we can call it clinically diagnosed tuberculosis. This slide is very important. From here you can get an idea when you call a patient suffering from tuberculosis. Okay. Now we will look actually the same figure and you try to find that where this patient will go. Suppose you take the first case, smear positive tuberculosis. So what will you do? What will you go? You will go for clinical microscopical examination and he will be confirmed as microbiologically confirmed TB. Now what will happen to the next case, smear negative TB? So you can see smear becomes negative, chest X-ray, maybe chest X-ray is suggestive and CBNAT gives you the actual diagnosis that he is positive. So the patient, he is positive but he is smear negative, that means in the sputum the AFB you cannot find the AFB. Okay. Next is no tuberculosis. So how you can trace it? So it will go for microscopy, it is negative, chest X-ray negative, clinical suspicions, also think that yes, there may be alternative diagnosis likely, then you give the patient all clear from tuberculosis and he will be checked for any alternative diagnosis. Then no tuberculosis but chest X-ray suggestive. Now I would like to pause the video and you trace the things yourself and check that you are right or not. Okay. So how you tell a patient that no tuberculosis but chest X-ray is suggestive? Okay, let's look at that. Microbiological negative but chest X-ray is positive. Then see, as CBNAT is negative, he will be referred to the expert and he will think that yes, it is an alternative diagnosis. So ultimately that is why we have called it no tuberculosis, because expert and CBNAT, these are the final two common pathway, both of them has thought that he is not tuberculosis but chest X-ray is suggestive. So the patient will go in that route. Okay. Now clinically diagnosed tuberculosis. So first he will go to microbiologically, he becomes negative, then chest X-ray negative, then again you think about that and do an CBNAT, it is negative, but the expert thinks that he is positive. Now he becomes clinically diagnosed tuberculosis. So CBNAT is negative, chest X-ray is negative, AFB is negative, still the expert thinks that he might be suffering from tuberculosis. So this is called clinically diagnosed tuberculosis. And finally remember, if a patient is suffering from HIV co-infection, you do not have to do any chest X-ray or microscopy. You can do, but it is not required for diagnosis. You directly do a CBNAT. So the patient will directly go to CBNAT. If he is positive, he will go to the microbiologically confirmed tuberculosis zone. Okay. So this is the total picture how you do different kind of diagnosis, and I think this slide will help you to diagnose. You think carefully, if required you see this part of this video again and again and have a clear understanding of when we call a patient microbiologically confirmed, when we call a patient clinically diagnosed tuberculosis, because it is very important for your clinical practice also. Now moving into the drugs. Now I think you have done it in your prescription class. There was a prescription where you have to prescribe drug for tuberculosis patient, and you give these drugs isoniazid, rifampicin, ethambutol and pyrazinamide, and you have to add pyridoxine, which will reduce the peripheral neurotoxicity of isoniazid. But remember, this prescription is like slightly outdated. Why? Because you can see here, one tablet to be taken before breakfast, one tablet to be taken 1 hour after breakfast. So this kind of things is not present right now, because now we have fixed dose combination of these drugs, and patient takes only one tablet, one type of tablet rather, and based on his body weight he may need to take 1, 2, 3 or 4 tablets, but there is only single type of tablet, and all the tablets, one tablet will contain all these drugs, and this has been implemented in 2016 in RNTCP program, and this will actually improve the compliance of the patient. Patient may take 2 drugs, may forget one drug. So with only one drug, this kind of problem will not occur, because now you have to take drugs only once daily. So this is our anti-tubercular drugs. So first line drugs you know already: isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide, ethambutol and streptomycin. If the patient has resistance to one or more first line drugs, or if it is contraindicated to that patient, then we go for second line drugs. So in case of resistance or in case of severe adverse drug reaction, we have to go for second line drugs. Second line drugs are fluoroquinolones, especially levofloxacin and moxifloxacin is used. Also capreomycin, kanamycin, amikacin, ethionamide, PAS and clofazimine. These are all second line drugs, and there are some newer drugs which does not have very, this linezolid and amoxiclav, they have proven some amount of efficacy, but it is not very sure. But bedaquiline, it is a very good drug, it has been recently introduced, and this is an alternative way of grouping. So group 1 are the first line drugs, isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide and ethambutol. Group 2 are injectable anti-tubercular drugs, mainly the aminoglycosides like streptomycin, kanamycin, amikacin, capreomycin. Group 3 are fluoroquinolones. Group 4 are second line oral anti-tubercular drugs like ethionamide, cycloserine, para-aminosalicylic acid, and group 5 drugs are drugs with unclear efficacy. So amoxiclavulinic acid, amoxicillin clavulinic acid and linezolid, clofazimine, these drugs. This is an alternative classification, and bedaquiline has not been mentioned here, but probably the after the classification was introduced, the bedaquiline has come. So you can write any one of them. I will tell you that you better stick to this classification, the first line, second line and newer drugs. And this is a timeline graph which shows that the streptomycin was introduced a few years after 1940, between 1940 and 1950. In 1950, around 1950, isoniazid, pyrazinamide was introduced, and rifampicin was introduced in 1960s. So you can see the most of the first line drugs, almost all of the first line drugs are actually 50 years older, and the reason probably is that the main drug development is done by developed countries, and in the 1960s, after 1960s, there was substantial reduction of tuberculosis cases in the developed countries. Developing countries, there were plenty of cases, but we do not have sufficient infrastructure, or I don't know, you can say that our approach is not very good about drug development. So whatever the reason may be, there was no drug newly approved for tuberculosis for long 30-40 years. But after 1990, another new disease came into the market, that is HIV. Now with HIV, the tuberculosis becomes again very much important for developed countries also, because as the prevalence of HIV increased in developed countries, comorbidity or co-infection with tuberculosis also increases, and they again tried to discover new drugs. However, moxifloxacin linezolid, you cannot say that it is a very new drug for tuberculosis. Still they tried it with tuberculosis and had some efficacy. And finally after 2010, about 2015, the new drugs like bedaquiline and delamanid has come, and you can see that there are some other drugs in the pipeline, and this is the whole timeline. Okay, so from here you can remember the name of the drugs as well as their introduction. So this is isoniazid. We will continue discussion about individual drugs from the next class. So for this was all about today. So again we learned about the history of tuberculosis, how the pathology of tuberculosis and the Ghon's complex. We learned about some X-ray and how the diagnosis is done with microscopy, culture, CBNet and radiology. CBNet is the most sensitive one, but culture is still remains the gold standard. And this is the how we can diagnose the presumptive pulmonary tuberculosis, and from this you try to remember when we call a patient microbiologically confirmed and clinically confirmed. And this is all about anti-tubercular drugs. From in the next class we will discuss about the individual anti-tubercular drugs and different regime that we currently using against tuberculosis. So goodbye for today. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next class.